You to join me as we explore places to go and things to do. We're not only going to explore a place today, but we're going to explore a family. We're going to be exploring the family dynasty of the Hammersteins. My guest today is Oscar Hammerstein III, the great-great-grandson of Oscar Hammerstein. We're going to learn a lot about him, and the grandson of Oscar Hammerstein II, the great lyrics composer. And the term that I use, the family dynasty, is an interesting. How does it feel to be part of a dynasty?
Well, I'm very proud of it. I enjoy the responsibility and the work that it has given me. I can say I'm honestly very proud. I have spent the better part of the last 5 years actively researching my family's history, and I've been collecting material for an archives to flesh that history out in pictures.
And that's basically the reason that we're talking today, is the fact that you are participating in a series of celebrity salons that are being done, have been done for the past few weeks, and will continue on as a fundraiser for the Westchester Community College Foundation. And you'll be making a presentation on May 19th in a home in Mamaroneck on some of the things that we're going to be talking about today. We'll talk some more about the celebrity salons in a few minutes. Okay. But this dynasty actually started with your great-great-grandfather. Most people, when they hear the name Oscar Hammerstein, think about your grandfather, the composer of what? You named them.
Well, Oklahoma, Showboat, South Pacific, Carousel, The King and I. He is a giant in his field, but I found it just as interesting, perhaps even more interesting, because he was more obscure, to study Oscar Hammerstein I, because whereas Oscar II's accomplishments were words on paper, Oscar I's accomplishments were brick and stone, building in neighborhoods.
So let's talk about the family first.
Sure.
Now, we have some photos here of your great-great-grandfather in the upper left in the illustration, and your grandfather in the lower right in this illustration that we have here. And the other two gentlemen are?
They are in the upper right-hand corner, Arthur Hammerstein, and in the lower left-hand corner, Willie Hammerstein. These two people are Oscar I's sons, two of his 4 sons, and Willie Hammerstein in the lower left hand is Oscar II's father. Arthur was an aide-de-camp to Oscar Hammerstein I and helped him in all levels of his ambitions, and Willie Hammerstein was more precisely worked with vaudeville. So vaudeville is his specialty.
The family seems to be involved in the theater going back, but your great-great-grandfather, Oscar Hammerstein I, actually did not start in the theater.
That's right.
And so his background was that he came to the United States as a young boy, didn't he?
That's correct. He got to this country, essentially he'd had an argument with his father in 1863 as a 15-year-old. He studied music up until the time he was 15, but he obviously had not practiced one day, and one day he had instead gone ice skating, and when he returned, his father gave him a whipping with the skate strap. So what he did was he pawned the violin. Talk about irony working both ways. And he took his $36 and stowed away aboard a cattle steamer to Hull, England, and then bought freight steerage to America on a steamer called the Isaac Webb, which endured an 89-day voyage, which is unusually long.
Now, when he got to the United States, he was 15 years old?
He was, I believe, 16 at this time. He left in the winter of 1863, so my speculation is that he arrived in the spring of 1864. If you're on a 90-day trip, that would figure.
And he did menial work, didn't he?
Yes, he swept up in a cigar store. In fact, there's an irony there. One of the things about Civil War-torn New York City in 1864 was that there was a labor shortage because of all the semi-skilled workers who had been conscripted into the war. So it was easy to find a job, and the advertisements in the want ads of the papers newspapers of the day said as much. They would look for anybody. He was just wide awake. So he got a job sweeping up in a cigar factory.
And that, of course...
And that led to his millions.
Sure. Why don't we talk about how the millions did not come as a result of his theatrical, although, of course, some of them were profitable, but were responsible for him being able to get into that. What happened? Well,
one of the marriage made in heaven was the marriage between Oscar Hammerstein and cigars. Oscar found his first job in a cigar store, and to make a little extra money, he would tinker with machines in the basement to see if he could get them to work more efficiently or to produce more cigars. And it turned out that he had quite an aptitude for it. Right away, he was making good money from his patents, and that provided him with the most dependable means of support for his theater ambitions throughout his entire life. He continued to invent until 1919, the year of his death, so that he never stopped. It was what I think it was what a man does when he's insomniac and he can't sleep. He spent nights inventing over a lathe, and it paid off. So what was his first venture in the theater? Well, let's see. There are a lot of partial forays in his early days. He would take the money he made from his cigar inventions and he would invest them in German opera, mostly, with a man named Adolf Neuendorf, who was a conductor and concert master back then. And they would make some money, but invariably they would stay in the business too long and they would lose it all. And he would come back to his wife and say, "I've lost it all," and she would check under the bed, and sure enough, there would be no money there, and she'd be furious. And he'd vow never to do it again, and certainly he would do it again and do it again. These would be considered unofficial forays into the theater. His first official foray into the theater was in 1889 when he built his first theater. In order to raise the money for that, he had to sell some patents and his interest in a newspaper that he'd begun, a trade journal called the U.S. Tobacco Journal. Which still exists. Still exists. It's called the U.S. Distribution Journal, and it's there to tell the trade about the activities in the wholesale and retail markets of tobacco and candy. So candy, for some reason, was included somewhere in its history, and so its name was changed. But yes, it's got a continuous. Let's take a look at Oscar Hammerstein the First as this illustration. It's a drawing, isn't it? Yes, it is. This was probably at the height of his career. This was actually just a little over the arc of his career. This was 1911. At this point in his career, he had given 4 years of opera to rival the Metropolitan Opera. In fact, had them aesthetically on the ropes, if not financially on the ropes. But he had spent himself down to nothing, and so they paid him $1,200,000 to get out of the business. What did he call his opera company? The Manhattan Opera. Where was it located? It was located between 8th and 9th Avenues on 34th Street on the north side. It still exists. The theater? Yes, it does. As a theater? No, it still exists. It's not used as a theater. There are no seats, and the balcony is pretty beat up, but it can be renovated and is still a theater, yes. You mentioned the fact that he built his first theater. Today we're going through a time when Times Square is being revived. Right. But really, you might say that he was the father of Times Square. I maintain that vociferously. I think that there was one or two theaters that started to crowd around the south end of Times Square, which was then called Longacre Square, but nothing by any stretch that rivaled what you see here, the Olympia Theater, which opened November 25th, 1895. Where was that located? That was located on the east side of the square, between 44th and 45th Street. Essentially, it was right in the heart of what was then called Longacre Square. It seated 6,000 people. And on opening night, Oscar characteristically sold 10,000 tickets, leading to riots in the streets. So that Times Square can be said to have begun with a bang. It was the bang of that opening night. Was vaudeville presented there, or? Well, you could call it vaudeville, though I think 1895 is still young to be calling this vaudeville. He would put on a lot of slapstick comedy, lots of a medley of different material. He brought in a vaudevillian named Yvette Gilbert. He brought in Weber and Fields, who enjoyed phenomenal success later, and whose family is another theatrical dynasty. But he also put on a lot of his own ballets and his own marches and waltzes. He continued to compose as well as invent, and from his childhood education. So he was constantly putting on some of his own stuff. He wrote parodies and sketches, sometimes mocking the events of the day, which were very successful. But it was too large. Essentially, his attempt to incorporate all aspects of entertainment into one building was inflationary to the market, and within 3 years, this failed. But within a year, he was back again.
Built another theater?
He built another theater, right there.
And what was that theater called?
Okay, well, that was called the Victoria Theater. The Victoria Theater was built in 1898, and it was devoted entirely to vaudeville. It didn't start as a vaudeville house. Oscar had, I think, in his mind a way of replicating what he had done up in Harlem. In Harlem, he had built two theaters, one that dealt with highbrow entertainment and one that dealt with lowbrow entertainment. One was very expensive, legit drama, and the other one was cheap vaudeville, essentially. And the cheap vaudeville would pay for the costs of the expensive, legit drama. And I believe that he was trying to reconfigure this down on 42nd Street by building first the Victoria and then the Republic Theater. So he'd have his lowbrow vaudeville theater, making him fistloads of money, and then he could indulge his high art pretensions with the Republic.
Now, this is a very interesting, I think, a very interesting scene, because it shows not only the theater, but it also shows the area. What are we looking at? There's a trolley car in the picture?
Okay, what we're looking at is Hammerstein's Victoria. It's called Hammerstein's Theater of Varieties when this picture is taken. It's at 42nd Street and 7th Avenue. It's pretty much the epicenter of the Times Square area. It is, let's see, it was built in 1898. It was built with very little money. Oscar was just recovering from his debacle with the Olympia and built it very much on the cheap with materials he'd found all around the city. And in 1904, it was converted to a vaudeville house, and Oscar's son, Willie, was made the manager. And he ran it extremely successfully for 17 years.
Now, does that theater still exist?
It does not still exist. It was completely pulled down in the 30s, I believe, to make way for the Roxy or the Rialto, or maybe the Rialto. But the Republic that stands next to it still does exist, and is now called the New Victory Theater. It's a non-profit children's theater. The one around which much of the has been made of the redevelopment and revitalization of Times Square. Of note, Oscar kept the roof rights to the Republic Theater, so that he connected the roofs of both theaters and presented a third entertainment spectacle there called the Roof Garden, which concentrated more with cheaper, lighter entertainment that could be consumed with beer and food. So that it was dumb acts like cowboy rope riders, jugglers, acrobats, clowns, stuff that could be seen to be could be entertaining just for being seen.
We're going to continue a few minutes and talk about the result of all the things that he did. But first, I do want to remind our viewers that we're talking today with Oscar Hammerstein III, and the reason that he's here is because he will be doing a lecture, a presentation, including some of the things that he's just touching on today, as part of the Celebrity Salons, which are fundraising for the Westchester Community College Foundation. Some of the other dates, these are presentations involving various homes in the area. Of course, May 19th, he will be doing his presentation at a home in Merrimack. On June 2nd, there will be a visit to a home, Kobamong, which is 15 acres, beautiful gardens, quite an extensive, beautiful, unbelievable place to visit. On June 9th, there will be a discussion of women in various cultures with two prominent women authors. And on June 23rd, a visit to the Rockefeller home, Kaiket. Those of you who are interested in getting more information should call this number, and we'll put it up in the closing credits. It's 914-785-6670. 914-785-6670. Oscar Hammerstein, a name that has moved from your great-great-grandfather to your grandfather to you.
Yes.
Generation skips.
Yes, we do. You are asking the wrong Hammerstein as to why I am the recipient of the name. It seems as if the name Oscar comes around every other generation. I hope my son names his son Oscar. I have to admit it. After living a life with it, I enjoy it, and hope somebody else can too.
Being part of a dynasty and having a name such as Hammerstein, it seems that you and other members of the family are connected with the arts. Before you started to devote your time to writing about the family, researching, you must have a tremendous knowledge of family history.
Well, one observation I often make is that our family has been in the theater business. When you talk about theatrical dynasties, often you might think of the Barrymores or those people who are actors or directors who, when you ask them about the business, they tell you about the method of acting or what's changed in the ways that and acting is very timeless. It's been pretty much unchanged for 2,000 years. But when you talked about somebody who's in the theater business, you're talking about a person who's very much of his time. Mm-hmm. And so to study this family is to study not only the business but also the history of Times Square. It's a great way of studying the history of Times Square and what has changed in the business. That which is not timeless, but those things which change. And I'm very grateful for that because it gives me a great perspective that I didn't have.
Is the arts in the genes, or is it because you're exposed to that world, you and your uncles and your
I don't know. No, I can't. I'll avoid that question. I'll say this: when it's a family business, back in the 1800s, you went into the family business.
Yes.
That it happened to be in the stage would be quite by the by. I mean, everybody went into the business in my family. My great grandfather came to this country and he started this dynasty, and his 4 sons worked for him. Pretty much all their sons worked for him. Some of their daughters worked for them. Grandchildren have worked for them. We've had at least 4 generations working in the theater. My uncle, my father, my mothers and stepmothers, they all are in the theater business. So that so it seems as if I don't know. I can't say if it runs in the genes because it's been in the nurture so long. I don't know what the nature can claim.
Now State Fair, which is currently playing on Broadway.
Yes.
And who directed it?
My father directed it, co-directed it with a man named Randy Spears, and I never really liked the show, as I thought that the plot was very light, and I went to see it, and they've reworked that show to a fairly well. It's a wonderful show, and a complete surprise to me as someone who thought they knew the properties. I've seen a renaissance come over that show. That is a great state fair. I will say that, and I'm biased, but what can I tell you?
Well, I'm biased too.
I'm surprised.
I'm
surprised you myself
Hammerstein biased. Now, certainly King and I is now playing.
Showboat's
playing.
There are a carousel just left. There may be plans for Oklahoma in a couple of years. So we'll always have a first-run show on Broadway, I believe, from here on in. And these shows also go out on the road and are very successful in other places like Chicago and Toronto and other places where I know Showboat's playing now and where Carousel's
playing. Let's talk about your grandfather, Oscar Hammerstein II. A lot of things have been said and written about him and his talent. He worked with wonderful composers, Richard Rodgers, Jerome Kern, Sigmund Romberg.
Quite true.
How would you sum up the essence of
I'll try to. He was born with a theatrical silver spoon in his mouth by virtue of his being born into this family. In a way, he got to see a perspective on theater that made him bold. He had a lot of failures. Let us not gloss over the fact that in this man's life he has written dozens of clunkers. But the thing that is interesting about it is that he always, when he does his best work, it's because he aims highest, and because he's not afraid to let the story tell the show. most people deal with the convention of theater as if the show tells a story. That is to say, if you need a good high kicking curtain raising act in the first act in the beginning, we've got to have that. We'll work the story around that. Oscar was completely the opposite of that. He always believed if there was no call for a chorus, you didn't have him in. You let the story, the book, determine the dynamic of how you presented the story.
Was that a question of confidence in his own ability because of the family background, or was it integrity?
It was a mix of integrity and pragmatism. He was a man who was schooled out of the operetta school, and when it came to syncopated rhythms of the Gershwins and sophisticated lyrics of the Hearts, he was not a man who could write quickly or topically, and so when he tried, his results were mediocre. It was only when he decided to leave that kind of writing to other people that he really excelled. He began to find himself with a show called Carmen Jones back in 1942, and it was clear that he had reached a point in himself where out of that would come other shows like Oklahoma and Carousel.
Who wrote Carmen Jones with him?
Nobody. That's Bizet and he.
Okay.
He adapted Carmen.
He adapted
to a new story with essentially a black cast.
He's written with the best, hasn't he?
Yes, he has, living and dead. Remember when Oklahoma came out and everyone was praising him to the skies, he took out an ad in Variety that listed his 11 previous flops in a row with the amount of performances, like 6 performances, 67 performances. He just listed all his failures and he put it in a full-page ad in Variety, and he said, "I've done it before and I can do it again." Just to give people give him a little breathing space. Should people be expecting too much from him on the second go-round? So he had humility.
Well, he was also very practical, I suppose,
very practical.
in doing that.
He was also very hardworking. He was extremely disciplined. His life was very structured to work. He didn't enjoy socializing, much like Oscar I. He did it as a necessary end of the theater business. You'd think that the theater business would attract gregarious types, but indeed he did it because he had to. But he worked very hard, and he kept to the truth of the book, and he would sink or swim on the truth of the book. If the book had dramatic power, he would find a way to express that dramatic power, and he wouldn't stop the show for vaudeville acts or star turns or things that didn't fit.
It's interesting how the circle turns around. Now here you are, you probably know more about the family than anybody else and know where the archives are and when copies.
Yeah.
You must have an enormous collection too.
Well, when a person goes through their life, every day they leave something behind that could go into the record. You have to be a little judicious. I mean, if you were to spend your entire life cataloging somebody else's life, you would have no life of your own. But I have, in the last 4 years, gotten a good sense, not a complete sense, but a generally good sense of the history of the whole family starting back in 1847 in Germany. So
probably know where everything is if you don't know.
I do. There are archives. See, I've been collecting material for an archives, but there are other archives that are obviously very good. There are public libraries and centers of study that have great material, and I avail myself of them all the time.
So you do lectures, you're writing a book, you're working on a documentary.
I do walking tours.
You do walking tours.
I'm working on a picture book, a documentary. I do lectures about Oscar II as well.
And not only that, but the circle comes complete. Your great-grandfather started with cigars, and you've got an article out now in
Cigar Aficionado. It will be coming out in a couple of days, which will put the connection between cigars and Times Square together. There is a connection, and it's a lovely story, which I hope that you all read and buy.
Are there things that you haven't discovered yet? Is there? I mean, the family has been so well covered over the years. There must be an enormous amount of material.
It's definitely been covered as far as those who have an interest in our family relative to the theater business is concerned. As regards myself, I have other interests besides that. I am interested in our roots. I'm interested in knowing how our family behaved in Germany back in the 1820s and 30s and 40s. How did we become Orthodox Jewish from what was essentially a Lutheran name? So there are questions that I don't have answers to, and that will continue to keep me busy for the next decade or so.
So you've gone back beyond.
I've gone back to Oscar I's father, Abraham, and his migration from a little town on the Polish-German border called Stettin, and Berlin and Hamburg and other places where they settled. But I'm not so much interested in them as characters so much as the forces that shaped Oscar's interest in opera. Because I have a funny feeling he brought something. He loved opera as a 6-year-old, as a child in his music appreciation classes, but a love for it seemed to have really started almost in infancy. And I have to wonder whether or not his religious upbringing, or what traditions went into influencing him to be so passionate about music. For if you look at the way he produced opera with a missionary zeal unlike anybody at the time, and so he brought a seriousness to it. Just like Oscar II brought a seriousness to musical theater that hadn't up until that point existed.
Are there any other people who are writing for the theater in the family?
My Aunt Alice does translations, operatic translations. My father has written a few musicals, and he has written a few reviews. But I don't think that we've gotten into that too much. It's a rather large shadow cast by Oscar II.
Is that shadow something that covers what you do? In a few words, I don't want to go into a long discussion of that.
I'm happy toiling in the shadow. I have no problem with that. I enjoy it. It's a big responsibility. I feel like I'm on an educational mission. Everywhere I go, the story that I tell enthralls people.
It's obvious that you enjoy it and that you have pride in your family, and I have pride in the fact that you came here and spoke with us today, because it's a fascinating story. My guest today is Oscar Hammerstein III, the latest in a long, successful dynasty in the theater. I'm Norman Liss, and the name of this program is The Way to Go. And until next time, enjoy yourself.